Axle bearing and seal replacement on an integral C-clip designed axle. After removing the cover and the pinion pin, push the axle shaft inward to expose the C-clip. Use needle nose pliers to remove the C-clip. Remove the axle, being careful not to rotate it. Use a rag to catch the oil on the shaft. When the axle reaches the end of the housing, use the C-clip groove in the axle to catch and leverage out the axle seal. Here we can have a better view of the C-clip groove in the end of the axle that was used to remove the seal. This is an axle bearing puller kit. The swivel jaw tool is used to grab behind the outer race of the bearing. Proper sizing is important. Select a jaw that is too large will get caught in the housing. You can see this jaw extends just past the outer diameter of the bearing race, making it too large. The 3 forcing stands now have to be bolted to the puller plate. The swivel jaw and puller bolt is inserted into the axle and the jaw is positioned behind the bearing. The puller plate and forcing stands are positioned over the puller bolt and the stands are positioned against the backing plate of the brake assembly. The roller bearing for the tool is placed over the puller bolt. Lubricate or grease is added to the threads of the puller bolt. Then the nut is threaded onto the puller bolt and hand tightened. When you're ready, the setup should look like this. Use a box end wrench to tighten the nut on the forcing screw to remove the bearing. Prepare the housing for the new bearing by cleaning it out with a rag and checking for nicks or damage to the inside of the housing. Inspect the bearing to see if it's directional or designed to go in only one way. Place the bearing in the housing without lubrication. Find a forcing button that can be used to hammer the new bearing in. Make sure the forcing button fits the diameter of the bearing outer race. Use a suitable hammer to hammer the bearing partway into the housing. Finish the job with a punch driver to hammer on the forcing button to fully seat the bearing against its stop in the housing. A clear sound can be heard when the bearing is properly seated against the housing stop. Check the fit of the seal outside diameter in the housing. Then slide the seal over the axle and check the fit of the inner seal as it fits onto the sealing surface of the axle shaft. There should be a slight drag of resistance. Before installing the seal, apply white grease to the back side against the garter spring. The grease will keep the spring from popping out when the seal is installed with a hammer. Also apply some grease to the inner seal surface. Wipe all the grease from the outer circumference of the seal. Listen to the instructor's instructions.
So you can kind of feel when it's cocked a little bit, so you can kind of get it started a little bit. You see it cocked? So I'm going to come over here and try to get it started over here. Okay, now that I got it started, now if I want to, I can grab a spacer or something like that and use it to drive it in straight if I want to. And you typically want it about flush like that. You might go in a little bit further. Typically flush.
What
like
about
that.
this stuff on the outside?
That's fine. That's actually a sealant. That red paint is actually a sealant so that it seals between the housing and the outer part of the steel.
The finished job should look like this. Complete the job by installing the axle, C-clip, pinion pin, and axle housing cover. Clear the vent and fill the axle with the proper quantity and quality of oil.